Welcome to Legalized Negligence, where we talk about Florida Statute 768.21, subsection 8. And today we are going to discuss the big Senate Judiciary Committee that met yesterday. Sabrina Davis is with me. She was in that meeting and she got to speak at that meeting. So last night I posted a video, the full video of the whole meeting. It's an hour and 48 minutes long. And now we're going to get Sabrina to tell us what it was like being in the room. I'm going to ask her some questions. And then later on today and over the next 2 or 3 days, we're going to break that meeting down and look at its components and talk about everything that they talked about. So, Sabrina, what it's like going to Tallahassee?
Well,
Not
mix of
that this was your first
emotions.
time.
Yeah, it definitely came with a lot of emotions. And I think the preparing and getting ready and packing and getting things in order at home and making the trip um all plays a really big part on a person's mind. And then when you get there, you're still not ready. At least it's like, when are you actually ever going to be ready? So um the meeting was very impactful. We heard from so many different walks of life. um People in support of the bill, people against the bill, people in support but against different parts of the bill. um Honestly, the reaction was just overwhelming to hear what all these people had to say, because every single person that went up there that spoke had a different view on everything, whether it was in support or in opposition of the way the bill stands. Even the legislators, they really spoke out. I believe that they really spoke deeply about their feelings. Um, and just sitting in the Senate committee meeting in the Knott building in Tallahassee, the capital of Florida, and hearing so many people talk about subsection 8 was in itself a moment that I personally have been waiting for.
It's funny. I was telling my wife after I watched the meeting yesterday, I was telling my wife, it is so weird to watch that because I have felt like for almost 4 years now that I've just been working on my own. You sit in your office, you dig through the law, you read the court cases, you look at the history, and you feel like you're just all alone in this fight. And then all of a sudden you tune in and you see these people not only from all over Florida, but people who flew in from other states who were speaking about it. And you feel like, wow, there are a lot of people out there trying to fight the same battle that I'm trying to fight. The way the camera was set up in the room, we could only see about 10 or maybe 15 people at a time. How many people were actually in the room?
Um, well, I was in a set of seats, like rows that were pretty much in the middle. And to my right was that many more twice, like this, like another section and then another section. And then to my left was one more. So I guess you could say there was 4 areas of a certain amount of rows that were long. Um, I would say there was roughly, that's hard to put a number on it. I tried to look in front of me and I sat near the front, but there had to be at one point at least 100 people in that room.
Wow. Now, I know some of those are for it, some of them are against it, but what that tells you is that there's talk. And one of the big things that I took away, and you can correct me um, if I've got this wrong, this is the first time any bill has ever come out of the Judiciary Committee in the Senate. Is that right?
This is the first time that 768.21 subsection 8 has been addressed in the Senate.
And it
Yes.
actually made it out. I know that last year that it didn't make it out of that committee, and I think the year before
It wasn't ever put up. The
wasn't ever.
year before that, it was temporarily postponed.
Yeah.
Half of it. The part for parents who lose an adult child was temporarily postponed. You know, at the time I didn't understand, but looking back, I believe for good reason.
Mm.
So it was I mean, there were so many people that some appeared to be standing along the back wall at one point when I did look. And it was powerful to the point that when the bill was done and voted on, almost that entire room got up and left because all of those people that were there for that.
Yeah.
And in fact, there was another bill that was supposed to be heard by Senator Roussan. Not sure if it was ever able to be presented because this bill went over. Um, so, and that meeting could have easily gone on a whole lot longer. But to my understanding, the Senate president wanted it a vote and, you know, for it to be done because a lot of those legislators actually had another uh committee meeting to get to that they were running late for, I realized afterwards. So it was definitely powerful.
Well, it was an hour and 48 minutes and some seconds, but that's a lot of time because you look at the three bills that they heard before that, and they were like bam, bam, bam. They just knocked them out in no time at all. And then this one comes up, and suddenly there's a lot to be said about it. So I think I think it's making some headway in Tallahassee that it has not made in years past. And I believe personally it's because, a little over a year ago, right at a year ago, we started presenting them with arguments that they had never heard before. They had always
Mm-hmm.
relied on what the lobbyists have said. And if you'll notice, the number of people who uh, were I'm going to say on the lobbyist side, on the insurance company side, because it kind of got a little confusing. There was the bill, then there was the amendment to the bill, and then there was the amendment to the amendment to the bill. So it got a little confusing. So I'll just say the people who want to see subsection 8 stay in place, there were a lot of people who spoke on their side as well. And I think it's because they realize we've got a movement going. We've got the ear of a lot of people in Tallahassee, and they're reading things that nobody has ever showed to them before. I know I've sent Senator Book and Senator Yarborough a lot of studies that I don't believe they've ever seen before, and they're starting to question. And I think if I remember right, and I'll go over this, I think I remember Senator Yarborough actually said subsection 8 has to go. It's just a matter
Yeah,
of
Senator Yarborough, he wants studies. He wants information on this. He is very open to receiving these things. And unless not you, but a person in general, unless you haven't supplied him with your studies or your documentation or your proof or your argument, I don't know how you can stand against what he's doing because he's asking you for it in general, the people, and that's our job to get it to him. He wants to understand this better. He's working with everyone involved. He has a very difficult task, but the best thing, in my opinion, that he could admit is that he is asking for those studies and he wants to receive them.
Yeah, and he said towards the end of the meeting, he said, "Look, this isn't over yet. This bill has two more stops to make." And remind me again, there was the rules committee, and what was the other one?
So the next one will be appropriations,
Appropriations, and then it's got to go.
and the third one is rules.
So,
Yes.
and he's, basically what he was saying is, don't stop communicating with me. Send me stuff. We want to see everything so that we can make the right decision. And for people who don't understand, when he talks about balance, he's got to look at the interest of the state as a whole and the interest of the people as the individuals. And there is a balance there. Unfortunately, up till now, all they've had to rely on is what the insurance lobbyists have been telling them, and they've been feeding them data that says if you get rid of subsection 8, all these doctors are going to leave the state. And we've been able to come up with data that shows the opposite of that. And he's asking to see more. If you've got something, give me anything you have. Basically, he's begging, provide me with the information so I can make the right decision here. Because if I
Yes.
make the wrong one, either the people are going to be hurt one way or the other. They're going to be hurt because they can't get into civil court, or they're going to be hurt because they're not going to have adequate health care in the state because doctors are leaving. And we've just got to provide that information. And that's one of the things that I'm going to talk about in one of the upcoming podcasts, is something called the boom and bust cycle of the insurance industry. I
Well,
pointed that out.
Philip, let me ask you, when Senator Yarborough says he's asking for that data and those studies, and those are out there, like you're saying, they're out there. Tell me, how many people do you really think are going to take the time to find those studies and send it to him?
Well, uh, I'm going to try to think of a polite way to say this. Less than 1%.
Okay, and are you talking about the opposition side or the advocate side?
On the advocate side, the people who want to see subsection 8 go away. Um, and I know a lot of people are going to be critical of me about that, but I have run across this same question in other battles that I have fought over other things. It always comes down to 1%. And you can look at that by, well, just look at our Facebook group. We've got a little over 300 people in there. There's about 345 people in there now. And how many people actually post stuff? I'm not talking about how many people like stuff, or how many people make a comment here or there. I'm talking about how many people actively post stuff for people to discuss. Well,
Yes,
there's
not very
me,
many.
there's you, and there's Travis. 3 people out of just over 300 comes out to 1%. And I've seen the same thing in other groups where you got all these people that stand by and watch, but
Well, I didn't mean to put you on the spot, but
that's okay.
the point I would like to make out of that is, the opposition, so to speak, is so well put together, and he's asking for data. Well, we can assure ourselves that they are sending him data. We need to be sending him data. Um, and another thing is, one of my biggest takeaways from yesterday, and before I say this, I want to make it clear that I understand being in a setting like that is overwhelming, is exhausting, emotional, anxiety triggered, all of those things, and they're very real. But one important thing that I want to say is, when somebody is preparing their speech or their bullet points on what to say, the importance of factual information is so critical, because any wrong spot, now you've decreased your credibility so much, and it's hard to believe anything else that you may say, right?
You're exactly
So,
right.
one thing I want to encourage people, and I'm not going to target anyone specifically, because I've probably done it too. Um, when you're writing a list or when you're making a speech, make sure, proofread it, reread it, have someone else read it. That's probably why you have someone else read research that you have done.
Yeah.
Do those things so you can make sure that you are speaking off of factual information.
When I get through researching something and I write it up, I'll bring it to my wife and I'll ask her to read it before doing any corrections. I'll just say, read this and tell me if it flows. Is my argument sound? Does it flow well? Do I have it? And she'll read it and I'll say, now tell me what that says to you. And she'll say my argument back to me. Well, and then, she might make a suggestion and say, well, it would flow better if you put this section above that section, because I had a hard time understanding how you got from here to there. So I'll edit it and I'll rewrite it. And then when I finally have it all done again, she does my proofreading for me, where she'll read it, she'll correct any spelling errors I've made, any grammatical errors I've made. She does not do my research. She doesn't, like I said in the previous video, she doesn't have a dog in this fight. She does it because she's married to me and she wants to help me. When you asked earlier, how many people are going to do this kind of research, I just want to show you a list of books that I've read since this past summer. This is called Medical Malpractice, Case Study on Florida, Report to the Congressional Requesters. This one is Florida Medical Malpractice Law Basics. This one is called Damages, talking about jury damages. This one is called Medical Malpractice in the American Jury. This is called The Medical Malpractice Myth. And this one is called Medical Malpractice Litigation, How It Works. Now, if you're going to understand the subject, you have to learn about the subject. And yeah, it takes a while to read this amount of information, but this is what Senator Yarborough was asking from us. If you've got a different argument than the insurance companies do and the doctors, then please present that information to me, because I have a very tough problem to solve. And if I don't get all the information, how can I solve the problem? And I think that's where we have failed in years past, is we've just allowed the lobbyists to speak, and we haven't presented our side of the argument. And I think this year we've been presenting our side of the argument.
And perhaps that's why they're going about things differently.
Yeah, we're seeing a huge difference in the way that the state legislature is going about this year, and this is where you've been a huge help. Me and Travis do a lot of the parts that we contribute to legalized negligence, is sitting here in our office, and reading this stuff and finding these studies and going online and pulling information and then putting it all together. And you've been able to help us get it into their hands. Yeah, sometimes we email it to them. But there are also times that you've taken that information and presented it directly to them and say, here, you need to read this. It talks about whatever the subject happens to be. But there's a lot of work that goes into it, and everybody
There is
to be involved.
And let me ask you this. This amendment that was added, obviously that's not the way the original bill was wrote.
Correct.
But when the original bill came out back in, I believe, October 2023, there was a lot of criticism on the ACA and DOH process.
Mm-hmm.
There was a lot of posts by people that are not affiliated with myself, or I believe you, that were saying kill the bill, ACA and DOH, remove them, kill the bill, et cetera, et cetera. Do you think any of those actions led Senator Yarborough to say, hey, okay, they want ACA and DOH removed, then what can I replace it with? And then here we have caps.
There was an email that I sent to Senator Yarborough at the end of October. I think it was like the 30th of October, if I remember right. And I pointed out to him 4 or 5 things in his original bill that I thought needed some attention. And he wrote back that very day. He wrote back. I was surprised. And he agreed with me on every one of them. He said, "You're right. That language needs to be tightened up. I didn't think about that. We need to change that." And I think out of that came the amendments. However, I want to say this. I think those amendments were being written way back, even maybe before the summer of 2023. I think the insurance lobbyist already had an agenda and they knew how they were going to attack his bill. Believe me, he didn't write that bill over a weekend. That bill has been in the works for a while. And I think the amendments have been in the works for a while. The good part about it is he is still willing to change things around. One of the things that we can draw from what the proponents had to say yesterday was we can listen to what they said, and now we know what to argue against. And it's like there was an anesthesiologist that spoke, a guy named Dr. Chase, and what he presented was 100% inaccurate. It does not go along with the research that was done by these people who wrote these books that I just held up. And if you'll notice, he said his insurance rates have gone up 3 times what they used to be after the caps were taken out. But then he ended with saying he has never actually been sued for medical malpractice. Okay, so I wonder why he would get upset with us if he's never committed malpractice and been sued for it. His rates have tripled. Why isn't he looking at the doctors who don't have to carry medical malpractice insurance? Why isn't he saying to the legislature, you need to enact law that makes all doctors have to carry medical malpractice insurance? Because if the pool of doctors is larger, then my malpractice rates will go down. Imagine being pulled over by a Florida highway patrolman and he says, "Let me see your license, registration, and proof of insurance." And you said to him, "I'm sorry, I can't afford insurance, so I didn't buy any." What's he going to do to you? He's going to say, "Then you don't get to drive this car anymore." So if the legislature can make you buy insurance to drive on the roads, why can't they make all the doctors carry insurance if they're going to practice medicine in the state of Florida? But instead, they just turn a blind eye to it. They even have a term for it. They call it going bare. These doctors don't even have to have insurance. All they have to do is post a sign in their office saying this office doesn't carry medical malpractice insurance.
And then they bring the false statement that doctors are going bare because they can't afford the high medical malpractice premium rates, when really it's a choice.
Okay. Now let me.
Is it really because they can't afford it, or is it because it's a choice?
Well, I can't answer that because I think it would be on an individual basis. There are probably some doctors who can afford it. There's other doctors who probably scrape by to be able to afford that. But look at it.
And how can they come to so therefore they should not be able to come to the proof determination, so to speak, that doctors don't have it because the rates are so high, when it varies on the individual.
Well, that's my thought on it. I mean, there might be some doctors who don't have it because the rates are so high. I remember when I was young and in the Navy and stupid, I bought a Corvette, and the brand new Corvette. And the very first insurance bill came in, they wanted to charge me $1,500 a month for insurance. And I said, I can't afford that. So I had to trade in the Corvette to get a car that I could afford.
Well, thank you for your service.
Well, as meager as it was, I appreciate that. But imagine, let's say you're a mom, you've got 4 or 5 kids, and all of them are now of driving age, and you're paying for the insurance for the whole family. And you got one of your kids that's out there speeding and doing donuts, and it keeps jacking up the insurance rates for everybody. What are you going to do? You're going to say you don't get to drive anymore until you learn how to drive properly because
You
you're
just you just reminded me of a really special memory of my dad and I actually. I was working at HCA North Florida here in Gainesville in pediatrics, and my dad calls me, and I was the only back office worker. I'm talking about shots, phone triage, physicals, everything. I did ordering of everything for the back office. There was only me. And my dad calls me and I like step out, like take the call. Is everything okay? And my dad's like, I need you to call the insurance company now and get your name off of my car insurance. And I'm like, Dad, I'm at work. What did I do? He was like, you didn't do anything, but you need to get off the insurance now. I said, can it wait till I get off work? He's like, no. I'm like, I was so confused. I hadn't done anything wrong. And looking back, he didn't really ever tell me why he was doing that. But I'm afraid he may have just gotten the his rates or something in the mail and saw that all of a sudden maybe they went up. I didn't do anything wrong, but anyways, I had to call them like immediately and get my name off as soon as I could. I had like the front office assistant hold the phone while the music was playing until they said, we're here, ready to help you. So then I ran out and I was like, I need to get my own car insurance policy. I need to get off this one. And anyways, that was quite a memory for me because I didn't ever understand why my dad was demanding I do it right now. But it's true that rates change based off of who it is, but I
yeah,
still don't know.
exactly. And I was young. I mean, when the insurance company saw that, okay, here's this 22 or 23-year-old guy, and he just bought a Corvette. We know what he's going to do. He's young and stupid, and we don't want to take that risk. So they raised the rates really high. Well, why I'm telling that story is one of the arguments that we can bring to Senator Yarborough is another way to drop malpractice rates is to make all the doctors in the state be required to carry insurance. So instead of, and I'll do this to keep the numbers simple, I know these aren't the exact numbers, but instead of just 1,000 doctors having malpractice insurance and the other ones not, well, if you make everybody carry it, now you have 10,000 doctors carrying malpractice insurance. The pool gets bigger because they're all paying money into the pool. And when one of them commits malpractice, now there's a bigger pool of money to draw from to pay that out. So then what do the 10,000 doctors who were contributing to this fund, what do they do to the bad doctor who's committing all the malpractice? They're going to turn him in. They're going to say, you keep costing us money because you keep committing negligent acts. So we don't want, we're going to make sure that we expose your malpractice.
Right.
That's the way it works in every other walk of life. Why doesn't it work that way in the medical world?
Some people made those points yesterday. Why don't all doctors have to have med mal insurance?
Yeah. And it astounds me that Florida doesn't require doctors to carry medical malpractice insurance. I mean, they have, next to an airline pilot, they have all these lives in their hands, and it's like.
So what kind of idea would it be to require all doctors to have medical malpractice insurance, order a study to be done, and then in 5 years see if the rates went down?
Well, that's what we need to present to him. You're putting caps on there and you're making it where there's going to be a 5-year study because this OPAGA group that he said they have to do a study and in 2029 they have to report back to the legislature whether or not the caps were effective. Well, then let's do that for malpractice insurance too. They're talking about balance. That's the balance that we need. If we have to give up something by being capped at $500,000, or the other one was $300,000 if it's a Medicare or Medicaid patient, and the other one was $175,000 if it was an emergency room doctor who made a mistake or committed malpractice, and those are two different things. Um, okay, if we have to give that up, then what do the doctors have to give up? Well, how about they have to carry insurance? And in 5 years, let's see if that makes a difference in their rates.
But I do want to point out last night it was somebody brought it to my attention that it was 150,000 for a Medicaid patient and 300,000 if it was an emergency services.
Well, I remember it being the other way around, but I could be wrong. It's easy to look up. I've got it in where.
Yeah, yeah. I
Uh,
just wanted to say it's one way or the other, but I don't remember which way.
yeah, I could pull the document up, but I don't want to turn this podcast into a review of that document. Um,
Yeah.
I, I'm pretty sure it was 300,000 for the Medicaid patient and 175,000 for the emergency room doctor, and that one, that's one of those ones that I think was. I'm got to be careful how I say that. I think that was written specifically for one case that happened last year, where they're trying to protect the emergency room doctors. These doctors overlooked something that they shouldn't have overlooked. And I see what they're trying to do. What they're saying is that an emergency room doctor is dealing with somebody who hasn't even been stabilized yet. So you can't hold him to the same level or standard that you do a doctor who has been observing you for 5 or 6 days. That emergency room doctor has a whole different problem that he's dealing with. So if he forgets something or is negligent on something, we don't want to penalize him as hard or as heavy as a doctor who has been coming in and checking on you every day for a solid week. Does that make sense?
Perhaps that's why the Department of Health did not find the two ER people involved by violating any standard of care, but they found my dad's primary care physician who took over for the next 4 days.
Yeah.
Um, they found him at fault.
Yeah, it may be, and this is just armchair quarterbacking or Monday morning quarterbacking when you can look at everything that happened, but you weren't there at the time that it happened. And I used to explain this to Travis when he and I first started talking. Man, I've been in so many codes, I can't even count I can't even remember how many. And when that person is on that bed dying and you're working at breakneck speed trying to save their life, you know, you can't remember every little detail of everything, and things are happening so quickly. It's a whole lot different when the patient is stabilized and the room is calm and you can think a little clearer. The adrenaline's flowing during a code, man, and that has to be taken into consideration. And I don't know
Yeah.
that it's so wrong to hold those doctors to a little bit different standard than you do a doctor who's been able to walk into your room each morning and say, "How you doing?" Well, we'll adjust your medicine a little here. Whole different story.
Yeah.
So, well, overall, what did you walk away from that meeting with yesterday? How did you feel about it? Do you feel like we've made some headway with the Senate?
Definitely feel like we made some headway with the Senate. I think that there was a lot of speculation on, you know, pushing this off till next session with new leadership. But I think Senator Al Britton gave a very powerful piece of information yesterday when he shared that he does believe in balance and that he supported Senator Yarborough's bill. So for me personally, I won't speak for everyone. I'm putting those ideas to rest. Wait till next year, next year, next year, because that's we don't know what's going to happen next year. But if it's anything based off of his comments yesterday, and I did meet with him briefly the first week of session on my dad's birthday, actually. And he reminded me to stay focused on what I'm there for and to not forget that. And then he pointed to my dad's dog tag and said, "Happy birthday." So, um, I'm not convinced that in a year is already determined that, you know, there's going to be some magical thing that happens and subsection 8 is repealed with no stipulations. I'm not convinced of that. So people have tried to convince me of that, but I'm not convinced. So that was one thing I walked away with. I heard a lot of new stories from people I haven't met and their loved ones that, you know, just reminded me that I'm not alone. You know I'm not alone, but there's a lot of people out there who have so many different stories. And it's hard to hear a lot of them because it's it just reminds me that we're all fighting for the same thing. We may not see things the same way, but ultimately we're all there because we were not able to access the court in the same way that other people are. And I personally think that the amendment that was added has um, unfortunately caused some people to lose focus on why they were ever fighting in the first place. And you know, I'm not political. I am like the most unpolitical person that you've probably ever spoke to, but it's so easy to get lost in politics because there's always going to be a problem. There's always going to be a problem. So just when you think your problem is getting resolved, naturally there's going to be another problem. And for those people that want to fight the problems until there is no problems, there will always be problems. This is politics. But, you know, that's why I have to remind myself, why am I here? And that's what helps me focus.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I think we're making some headway. This is not going to be an event. It's going to be a process, meaning that there are steps that are going to have to be taken. Yeah, ideally, I would love for Senator Book's bill to be the one that got voted on. It just wipes away subsection 8 and everything goes back to the way that we think it should be. Unfortunately, that's not going to happen. So we have to work with what we got. I'm always think about that movie Apollo 13 when, the astronauts were on the spaceship and, their systems started to screw up. And there was that one scene where they came in and they dumped all the stuff on the table and they said, this is what's on the rocket. This is what we have to work with. How do we make it?
Mm-hmm.
And that's where we
Right.
are now. This is what we've got. How do we make it work? And I think the way we make it work is we listen to what the other side's argument is, and then we find counter arguments to disprove those, and then use that to convince Senator Yarborough to see it our way. And if our evidence is strong enough, we can persuade him to do that.
Absolutely. I mean, he's asking for it. So for anyone that wouldn't send it, that's on them. But I'll be doing my research. I know you will. And are you laughing at me about me doing my
No,
research?
I'm laughing at me because that's all I do. That's what my
Is
life is.
research. I know.
That's it.
But you know, if you want to see change, then you have to be involved. If you're not involved, then you have, in my opinion, no place to complain. So, um, I I know he's asking for those, you know, different um pieces of information, and that's the best thing we can do at this point is get
Yeah.
it to him.
And the like I said earlier, I'm going to be breaking down that hour and 48-minute long meeting into little sections and doing podcasts on them. I know you want to be part of those, Sabrina. And whenever Travis gets wrapped up with the work that he's on right now, we can all just kind of go through them piece by piece, take everything that everybody said and analyze it and figure out what's, the best way to present it to Senator Yarborough. And I think we'll make a difference. I'm not going to say we get everything we want this year, but that's how politics goes.
Yeah, and I'll also say that there's just not a way to say everything in 3 minutes. And then when your time gets cut to 1 minute, like mine did, you can't say it all in 1 minute. I had a lot more to say. Um, powerful points, in my opinion, that I would like to have made, but that's out of my control. I'm blessed that I wasn't one of the people that where she read my name and just read if I checked against or in support of the bill. At least I had like my 1 minute, and for what it's worth, I did the best I could. I spoke from my heart, but it's already a hard spot to cram so much information into 3 minutes. You know, some people do it well, some people struggle with it, some people's time got cut like mine, but I think everyone did, you know, what they did, and we'll see what happens in the next committee.
Well, let me toss an idea out to you. Imagine if 10 people got together and you wrote out a 10-minute speech, and each one of you took 1 minute of that speech, and one right after the next, you got up and started reading. When your time was up, the next guy came up, he picked up. When his time was up, the next guy. So you have 10 minutes to get your message across to them, but you kind of like a relay race. That's one way to combat that. You know, instead.
That is absolutely one way to combat it. Although we don't know in what order they will call us or if
Mhm.
we'll be in a line, that is one way to do it. But unfortunately, the reality is getting 10 people to come to an agreement to agree on what was just wrote that took 10 minutes to say is a lot harder than some people realize.
Yeah,
So,
to get 10 people to do that, we would need 1,000 people to start off with. If you go by my 1% estimate, you would
you
need
are correct.
1,000 people to get 10. So,
Yeah.
well, thank you for your time, Sabrina. I've enjoyed it, and we'll start tomorrow trying to work on that, breaking down that whole hearing and sharing our thoughts with us on that. Sit tight. I'm going to end this thing, and then we'll talk for a minute. Let me find the stop the record button.